Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 to What If Deku was DOFLAMINGO's reincarnation. If you like this series or want to see any more of my content, you just like it for any reason, go onto my channel, like and subscribe if you can. It'll help out a lot. With that being said, I'm just gonna go straight into it. Aizawa starts talking. Okay class, you've probably heard rumors, but yes, we're going to the USJ. Everyone gets hype and starts talking until the bus arrives. They all hop on and the regular canon chat happens, with Deku being at the top of the class this time. They arrive and say how big it is. Pro Hero 13 stands up and starts talking, doing a lame-ass speech, which is thankfully interrupted by the League of Villains. Aizawa immediately jumps down to fight the NPC villains, and 13 huddles the students together. Deku, seeing the villains, decides to jump down with Aizawa, knowing he can hold his own. The regular teleport stuff would happen, and Ida makes his way out of the USJ. Deku and Aizawa are jumping people like it's not even hard. Teamwork is good between the two of them for some reason. Deku sees a man with his hand on his face, and a big bird thing looking next to him. He points at them and tells Aizawa to look. The man with hands all over him talks. "What are you looking at?" Scratching at his neck. "Nomu. Kill them. Starting with the brat." The Nomu rushes at them. Deku just put up 3 strings to protect him in time. Though the Nomu broke through them and smacks Deku, who ragdolls against the floor before he pulls himself up with his fingers in an interlock position and smiles. Letting a thick neck form, he waits and when the Nomu jumps, he flicks it into the Nomu's direction, completely slicing it. Aizawa looks up in horror as blood pours onto the floor. Shigaraki starts scratching his neck even more. "What the hell was that, hero?" Before looking at Deku. Straight to the point. "I like you." He stops scratching and stares coldly. "Nomu, finish him off." Nomu jumps straight at Deku and clobbers him into the stomach, sending him flying at the door. Deku tries to slow his fall, but he ends up slamming on the floor. Feeling like he's about to pass out, he controls himself with strings, completely marinating himself to keep fighting. He lifts his arms, feeling a crack as he does, and it closes his fists. A thick string cage appears around the Nomu, closing it on all sides. Aizawa turns off his quirk and Deku completely closes it, before passing out. All Might then appears, rushing down the stairs ready to fight. As Nomu was defeated, they then dip and let the NPC villains get arrested instead. Deku was taken to the hospital and the class is cancelled for the foreseeable future. After a week break off school, everyone returns, sitting in their normal spots in class, chatting amongst themselves. Deku was drawing. Aizawa popped into class, explaining the next big event, the UA Sports Festival. Everyone is hype and allowed a week off to train, as the festival is a big deal for them. Deku decides to train his quirk to use safely on others, figuring he would need to use it against the students without harming them eventually in the sports festival. Over the week break, he develops a move which helps him with this, taking inspiration from the USJ incident. In the changing room of the stadium, the crowd's footsteps can be heard. Deku is focusing himself, staring at the floor, trying to calm his nerves. He sees a familiar shoe come into vision. Bakugo stands there. "Don't think I'll let you get the better of me again, Deku. This is war." Deku looked up and smirked. "I'm about to make you my bitch," he said, straight-faced, before leading the class out of the stadium. The stadium roars. Everyone is out of their seats, screaming. The stadium is more than packed. Heroes everywhere. It was manic. Deku reminisced. They line up and Miss Midnight begins to introduce them all to the festival. Deku was then called up to make a speech. He kind of figured so since he got first place in the exam. Those speeches weren't his thing. He walked up and grabbed the mic. He looked into the thousands of onlookers. "There's a reason I'm on this stage and no one else is. I'll prove that today." He then hands the mic back to... and then walks away. The crowd has a mixed reaction, some loving it, some absolutely hating it. The other classes stare as Class 1A down as the first event is chosen. I'm going to be real, I don't want to do the obstacle course or the cavalry battle, they're both kind of lame, so I'm just going to keep the results as canon and skip to the 1v1 battles. President Mark screams over the intercom, "First round, Izuku Midoriya versus Hitoshi Sensei." The crowd goes nuts. They've seen what Deku can do in the other rounds. and their hype for him is insane. Deku readies himself, looking at Shinso with his hands crossed in front of him. The round begins. Deku, without saying a word, runs at Shinso. This is a fight, not a conversation, he thinks. He extends his right arm down to his side before flicking his wrist to the right. Shinso's eyes widen as mid-sentence he's yanked onto the grass outside the arena. President Mike screams, "Azuku Midoriya wins!" The next battles go on as canon until Deku vs Todoroki. The same conversation happens in the locker room between Deku and Endeavor, but Deku ignores him, walking past instead of giving him any time of day. He walks onto the stage and stretches his fingers before getting into a ready position. Holding both his hands at his sides, thick strings emerge, like the ones used on the Nomu. He thinks he's gonna use ice. Deku's intuition was correct. The round begins and Todoroki slams his foot down, creating a mountain of ice in front of Deku. Deku looks up and jumps before flying away into the sky. He brings his right arm in front of him and flicks his wrist with a big grin on his face. The ice disappears and Deku gets flung towards Todoroki. With his left hand, he latches onto Todoroki's left side, noticing he hasn't been using it. Todoroki looks down before getting yanked into the sky. He creates an ice pillar to catch him, but Deku destroys it. Todoroki looks at the floor before closing his eyes and bursting into flames. Deku's grin turns into a sadistic smile, as does Todoroki's. They face each other and Todoroki explodes with ice and fire. Deku looks at his hand before scrunching them together and creating thick layers on layers of string behind him. He launches them at Todoroki and completely obliterates his ice before smacking him out of bounds. Deku was surprised he actually used his fire and didn't know how long he could last against him, as his string doesn't exactly like fire. The other rounds go as canon and Deku vs Bakugo comes last. Deku walks onto the stage with a stone-cold face. His classmates in the stand notice how serious he is, knowing this wasn't going to end well. They knew he took that threat in the locker room seriously. Bakugo walks up onto the stage and returns as an even more serious face. You could almost cut the tension with a knife. President Mike starts the round and Deku takes a weird stance. Looking like a puppet master, he summons strings from the heavens itself to lock onto each and every joint on Bakugo's body. They tightly wrap as Bakugo turns around and starts walking out. Bakugo spams explosions. They start to burn the strings. Deku continues. Bakugo has enough and screams, contorting his wrist to blast an AP shot at the strings, breaking it. He rushes at Deku, who throws a massive explosion at Deku, which he counters by blocking with a small string piece, which ricochets Bakugo's elbow, forcing a miss. Deku sweeps in and uses his string to power load his elbow before releasing a nasty punch at Bakugo's gut, sending him into the sky. He then reconnects two strings on Bakugo's legs and throws him at the floor. He tries to pick him up, but Bakugo is already knocked out. Deku drops him and looks at the crowd, feeling kinda bad. All Might hands out the medals. Bakugo sits completely still, staring at the second place medal he received. Deku knew that he hit Bakugo hard. Deku looks at his internship opportunity plopped as a big folder in front of him. It was loaded. Thousands upon thousands of people willing to take him under their wing. He stared, scratching the back of his neck and kind of grinning. Before he got too ahead of himself, Miss Midnight comes running into the classroom. They had to choose hero names. Deku never really thought of it, and he was kind of stressing. Two big choices to make in a quick succession. He thought on it and a name came to his head. String Hero, Silk Sonic. He read over the files at lunch and one name stuck out to him. Best Jeanist. He'd always looked up to Best Jeanist a little. He thought it was kind of weird. His internship opportunities was accepted and Deku made his way to Jeanist's establishment. His week there wasn't too beneficial. If anything, he learned how to restrict people more effectively with a string, along with the more finesse with his fighting style. In this timeline though, he isn't in Hosu to save Ida, so Ida dies. But Deku gets his get back, don't worry. They get a week off again to mourn for Ida, though Deku wasn't too close with him, but he was disgusted someone would take the life of someone that young and secretly bore a grudge. He pushed it aside and instead used his time to study for his final exams. The week passed quickly and the time for finals finally occurred. His theory was draining and long, but he managed. He was more worried about the practical. It would be explained that he would be versing the teachers and that him and Bakugo would be paired up together to fight All Might. All Might jumps into the sky, landing next to Aizawa, looking menacing. The exams went as usual until Deku and Bakugo's turn. In this timeline, they're really like water and oil, they just don't mix. Deku's quirk scares Bakugo, and Bakugo's quirk destroys Deku's string. They don't talk before the match starts. They run down the center before they're hit by a large gust of wind. Deku is blown back, as is Bakugo. They stare in front of them, seeing a towering figure staring back at them. They look terrified at All Might. Deku decides to summon thick strings from below the ground, trying to halt All Might's movements, but All Might jumps, cracking the floor beneath him before decking Deku in the face. As All Might has no particular connection to Deku, he doesn't hold back. Bakugo stares in shock. He knows it's cooked. Deku wakes up midair and yanks Bakugo back before he can get punched too. He controls them and throws them away into the alleyway to catch their breath. All Might, however, doesn't like this, appearing next to them as he catches Bakugo's arm, who is about to unleash a full explosion, and throws him at Deku. Deku, using his training from the best genus, slings Bakugo to the right, avoiding the hit and wrapping Bakugo up to tank some of the blunt damage for him. Deku charges as All Might, creating a mini birdcage on him. All Might looks around him as he sees the birdcage start moving in. He yields immediately.